after which I'm sure that you will have your own questions. And I'm sure all of us are going to benefit with regard to the reimagining of L&D and coaching for the new world as we are progressing. Right? Over to you, Suri.
Thank you, SK. Good evening. Good evening, all the participants who have joined this webinar today. I think it's a great honor and privilege for me to be part of this webinar and then engage with you in a dialogue. In a dialogue on a topic which is very relevant for all of us today, as all of us are talking about our unprecedented times that we are experiencing. As all of us are getting ready for the new world, since most of us are L&D and coaching practitioners, we belong to this fraternity, this community. I think it's very important for all of us to come together and engage in a dialogue on how do we reimagine L&D coaching for the new world. I am largely an L&D practitioner. I am not a professional executive coach, but I will bring in some of my perspective. Largely, I would talk about more on L&D because that's where I belong. That's where I have my experience. But we will definitely share and exchange notes on the coaching aspect.
Request all of you to mute your mics, please. Don't mind. Thank you. Yeah, you'll have to unmute only Mr. Surya's mic, Krishna.
Yeah, I have unmuted.
Yeah, thanks. Please go ahead.
All right. So we have come together to talk about this very important, very relevant topic, reimagining L&D for the new world. Now, friends, when we talk about rethinking, reimagining, reinventing L&D and coaching, the important question is, what is the need for reimagination? What's the need for reinvention? Why do we need to rethink L&D? What's the need for it? When we talk about rethinking and reimagining, when we talk about re-envisioning or reinventing L&D, I think there must be a reason behind it. And when we try to find out what possibly could be the trigger or the need to reimagine L&D, my dear colleagues, we really need to look around and then see what's happening all around us. Because it's our circumstances, the larger ecosystem that we are part of, the changes that are happening all around us, that possibly could trigger the need for L&D to reimagine. So if the world around us is changing, we of course will have to stay back and think whether we should change ourselves or not. So for a moment, for the next few minutes, let's talk about what's changing, what's happening today. Let's look at what's happening in the industry. There are some interesting developments that we are seeing in the industry at this point in time. There is a higher frequency of black swan events. Black swan events are rare events which happen in societies, in nations, probably after many decades or maybe once in a century. But in the recent past, we are seeing the black swan events have started happening more frequently. The most recent one being COVID-19. But in the very recent past, we have seen 9/11, we have seen the 2008, the recession, we have seen Brexit, we have seen several others black swan events. Black swan events are rare events with very high negative implications, and a black swan event is something which cannot be predicted, but it can come and hit us badly all of a sudden. Experts really cannot predict when a black swan event would come. But we have started seeing a higher frequency of black swan events. That is really putting, the whole economy, business, industry, societies in a tailspin. Innovation and creativity and creative destruction of industries and products. So we are seeing great deal of innovation by organizations, by enterprises, by companies. At the same time, we are also seeing creative destruction of industries and organizations and even products and solutions. And why is this happening? Let me share with you an example. In 1955, the companies which featured in the Fortune 500 list, out of this Fortune 500 companies, out of these 500 companies, today, there are only 56 companies which still are in that same list, which essentially means about 89% of companies which featured in the Fortune 500 list in 1955, just about 6 decades ago, they have disappeared from that list. They're gone. Where did they go? Well, many of them shut down, many of them got acquired, many of them got restructured. Majority of them don't exist today. In about 6 decades, 89% of companies which featured on the Fortune 500 list do not exist in that list anymore. And the prediction is about 30% of the companies which feature in the Fortune 500 list today, they would disappear in the next 10 years. So this is a great example of creative destruction of industries, organizations, and products. As new technologies emerge, as accelerated market evolution takes place, as customer expectations continuously evolve, we see that there are only few organizations which can continue to innovate, survive. The rest get restructured, get acquired, or they disappear. What else is happening? We also see a decreasing product life cycle. So that's an interesting trend that we are seeing today. We probably took about 300 years to invent the wheel, but today Apple computers launch, it launches a new iPhone almost every year. So that's the pace at which innovation is taking place, and the product life cycle is it's shrinking year after year. So that's a phenomenal shift that's happening in the industry. So these are some of the developments, some trends that we are seeing in the industry. Now let's talk about what are the implications at the workplace. What is changing at the workplace, and what is changing in the work itself, and what's happening to the workforce. We are seeing some interesting shifts there. All of you know that gig economy is becoming a reality. Gig economy is an economy where you have part-time employees, contract employees, freelancers, startup entrepreneurs. They all come together and then form the gig economy. Gone are the days where people used to work full-time in one organization for 20 years, for 30 years, for 35 years. Now you have people working for multiple employers at the same time. There are freelancers, there are contract employees, there are contingent workers, there are part-time workers. There are men who choose to stay back at home, take care of the families, and allow their spouses to go to work. So that's the gig economy, which is really dramatically shifting the workplace. Distributed working is already a reality. COVID-19 has only accelerated it. As we go to a new world beyond COVID-19, many of us probably would continue to work from our homes. Many of us probably will never go back to the workplace again. And that possibly is going to be the reality. It's going to be a distributed workplace. The manager sitting in one country, in one city, and then hundreds of colleagues and team members working for this leader spread across the globe. Some of them are working from different offices across the globe. Some of them are working from their respective homes, from anywhere, any place, and so on. Millennials are rapidly increasing at the workplace. I think today there are about 3 out of 4 employees in an organization are millennials, and their number is increasing steadily. So they bring in a different set of preferences, tastes, their work style, work preferences are very different from Generation X and baby boomers. Organizations are increasingly valuing skills over qualification. There are 15 world-class organizations who have announced already that they're not going to look at qualification in the selection process. They said, our analysis, our research tells us that qualification really does not necessarily have a significant bearing on people's performance, or at least we are not seeing that. So it's going to be skills which would matter a lot over qualification. We will see, of course, massive job losses due to automation, and sometimes because of recession, because of COVID-19, because of various other reasons, we are going to see more and more job losses. And there'll be a lot of jobs which will be lost to automation, artificial intelligence, robotics, and so on. And we would also see, or we have already started seeing, coexistence of men and machines at the workplace. So today we work in a workplace where the same workflow is partly managed by men. When I say men, I mean both men and women. So partly managed by human beings, and there are other parts of the workflow which are managed by machines. So today we have a manager who probably manages a set of machines, bots, and he or she manages a group of people. So that's an interesting combination that we have started seeing at the workplace. And I very strongly believe that days are not very far before men and women would possibly report into a machine. That could happen. Time will tell us what's going to happen. Unemployment on one hand and unfilled jobs on the other. Robotics, automation, recession, depression, COVID-19, black swan events, etc., have led to massive unemployment. Millions of jobs have been lost. But at the same time, my dear participants, there are thousands and thousands of jobs which are unfilled because we don't have talent, because we don't have people who have relevant skills, who have knowledge and expertise in the relevant technologies and business models, etc. So these are some of the trends that we have started seeing at the workplace. So we talked about what's happening in the industry, in the economy. We talked about what's happening at our workplace. Now let's move on and let's talk about, in the context of the changes that we talked about, the developments that we discussed. What are the implications in L&D? Let's talk about these trends, what kind of opportunities they bring to L&D. This is going to be an interesting discussion. So all the changes that we talked about bring tremendous opportunities for L&D. No matter how much we worry about the future, the new world, we worry about what's going to happen to the L&D function. There are predictions that L&D might die, L&D might become defunct, L&D and coaching professionals may not have their jobs. I would say that there are plenty of opportunities which are coming our way just because what's happening all around us. So in the context of what we discussed about what's happening around us, now let's see what opportunities these are going to give L&D. So in the context of the changes that we talked about, because of the black swan events, because of creative destruction of industries and organizations and products, because of market evolution, because of evolving expectations of customers, organizations need to transform themselves. They need to transform themselves all the time. Organizations need to become resilient. So who is going to help them? Who is going to help organizations transform? It's L&D. Because when we talk about a transformed organization, it essentially means transformed workforce. If the workforce is not transformed, we cannot have a transformed organization. So who is going to transform the workforce? Tremendous opportunity for L&D. Organizations need to become resilient. And who is going to help them? They need to bounce back. Who is going to help them? They're going to look at L&D for support. Organizations need to come up with new business models. If they have to survive, they have to come up with new business models. In recent times, we saw plenty of examples. We saw cloth manufacturers manufacturing masks. We saw automobile companies manufacturing ventilators. And we saw the government of India announced that they're going to convert all, many railway coaches into hospitals. Just see how organizations, both in the public and private sector, commercial and governmental organizations, are really rethinking. They're coming up with new business models. Just a few days ago, I got a WhatsApp message from a travel and hotel company, and the WhatsApp message in the e-poster has a very interesting message. It says, "You want to work from home? Please come and stay with us, and stay with us in Kurg and work from our place." See, when the hotel industry is really struggling to survive because nobody's on holiday, there is one hotel which is trying to rethink and reimagine. They're saying, "Can you come and stay with us and work from here?" Organizations need to come up with new business models. And for them to survive, they need to come up with new business models. So who is going to help them become creative? Who is going to help them come up with new business models? L&D has an important role to play there. The coaches, executive coaches, will have a very important role to play there, because as the leaders will have to think about new business models, and they will look for help from L&D practitioners and from executive coaches. But it's not enough to come up with a new business model. What's also important is to train people and teach people how to implement the new business model. So organizations will again need help. They would need support from L&D to teach their people on how to implement the new business model. Organizations need to prepare for the new world. Coaches like you, L&D practitioners like you, will have to step in and help them. Organizations would need to prepare their workforce to innovate, because innovation is the only mantra for survival. If an organization has to survive for years together, they need to continue to innovate. And who is going to teach them to do that? Organizations need to prepare their workforce for distributed working. So we are talking about a scenario where a manager will have to manage people remotely. An employee will have to become effective at his or her work while working remotely. So who is going to enable people to this new way of working, to this distributed working model? L&D has to step in. Approximately, there are predictions, and this particular prediction is from McKinsey, and they say about 375 million workers may need to switch occupational categories. They may have to switch their occupation. They may have to pick up a new job, a completely different job from what they have been doing by 2030. So that means a massive need for reskilling and cross-skilling and possibly upskilling. And L&D has to play a very important role. 375 million, roughly about 14-15% of the workforce worldwide. And that's a huge ask from enterprises. L&D has to step in and support. So these are tremendous opportunities for learning and development practitioners, tremendous opportunity for coaches to step on, come in and make an impact. Now let's talk about what is the World Economic Forum saying. The World Economic Forum 2018 statement says that these are the 10 critical skills required for future of work. So as we talk about the new world, as we talk about the future, as we get ready and prepare ourselves for our lives beyond COVID-19, there are 10 important skills which are important. So this is a 2018 report. That could be some more changes to this, but this is, in spite of that, is still relevant. So these are some of the critical skills, the 10 top most critical skills, important skills for future of work. To name a few of them: critical thinking, complex problem solving, creativity, people management, coordinating with others, emotional intelligence, etc., are going to be 10 important skills for future of work. So this is again an opportunity. This is again an opportunity for us to look at how we can prepare the organizations, enterprises, business leaders, and the workforce for the future, for the new world. But as every positive statement probably comes with a rider, we could possibly also, if we look at it minutely, we would see some of these opportunities are also challenges for us. Now, I think it's the right time to transition to the next topic, which is challenges for L&D. What are the roadblocks? What are the challenges lying ahead for L&D as we get ready to move forward? So we talked about the 10 critical skills for future of work. That's an opportunity, but that's also a challenge. It's a challenge because if we move slow with these important critical skills, in terms of imparting these critical skills to the workforce, if you're moving slow, this is going to negatively impact business. If you're moving fast, this is going to create confusion among the workforce. So that's the challenge, that's the predicament. That's where L&D could possibly, potentially be in effect. If you go slow, it's impacting the organization. It's moving fast. The workforce is saying, why are you training me on this? I don't need these skills today. Train me on what I need today. So that's a fix, that's a challenge. So the critical task for L&D would be to strike a balance. Another important challenge, we are talking about innovation. We're talking about emerging technology. We're talking about technology becoming a disruptor, also an accelerator of momentum. We talked about how technology is leading market evolution, but interestingly, we are seeing organizations spending more and more money on technology, but possibly the money they're spending on learning budgets doesn't correspond with the investment that goes into technology investment. The money that goes into investing in technology is much higher compared to what's spent on learning initiatives. And that's a challenge. So, and then this might remain like this for a longer period. While organizations would continue to invest in new technology, invest in innovation, new business models, they may not spend as much on the learning budgets. Another important challenge that we're seeing today is L&D is still caught up in the past. We're still in the past. We're still in the pre-digital era. We still believe that the traditional method, the conventional method of training delivery is the best method. We still believe in the traditional, conventional methods of delivery. The tools that we used are still tools of the past. We need to move on. We need to reinvent. But unfortunately, the L&D community has not been very agile. The pace of change for L&D has been terribly slow. We are not moving at the pace that we need to move. That's a very big challenge for L&D as we look at moving ahead. Now, what next? let's talk about something else which is also relevant. While we talked about opportunities for L&D, while we talked about the challenges, but before we move ahead, we also need to understand that there is an emergence of a new learner, a new age learner, who is very different from the learner in the past, which is very different in terms of his or her preferences, tastes, learning style, etc. So the new age learner today has got some very clear preferences, some very clear expectations from L&D practitioners, from the coaches. The new age learner has some fundamental questions for all of us. The questions are like this: can learning be personalized for me? I don't care if you have a learning program for people, for all frontline managers in the organization. But is that a program which is exclusively personalized for me, which is suitable for my needs? Because I'm different, my needs are different, my objectives are different, my priorities are different. So I'm not really keen on going through run-of-the-mill, canned, standard programs, but can this be personalized for me? The new age learner is also asking, can the learning curriculum adapt to my pace? So if I'm moving slow, can the learning curriculum also move slowly with me? If I'm moving fast, can it also keep pushing content to me at a faster pace? Can it adapt to my pace? Can I access learning anytime, anywhere, any place, any pace? Can it be left to my choice? Can my learning move to my workplace? I don't have the time to step out of my workplace, go into a classroom, spend 2 days or 3 days there. Can learning come to my workplace? Can I learn while working? My attention span is very short. I can't pay attention for more than about 10 seconds or 10 or 12 seconds. How can you help me? Can content find me? When I switch on my smartphone, I get hundreds of notifications that this scheme is available for me, this discount is available for me on this product. Am I interested in buying? So similarly, can content find where I am? What is my need? What is my learning goal? And can content find me and then help me in my learning? Now, the next one is, can I be involved in the learning design process? When you are designing a learning, Mr. L&D practitioner, for me, well, I also need to have my skin in the game. I also want to be involved in the design process. I need to know what you're designing for me. I need to give you feedback at the design process. If possible, I would like to co-create my learning curriculum with you. So see the way the preferences of the new age learner are changing. It's very different from the learner in the past, which used to accept everything that the trainer or the instructor or the facilitator used to give him or her. He or she was looking forward to what the instructor is going to provide him. He was looking forward to a structured classroom program, a structured defined learning path. But now he wants flexibility, he wants choice, he wants involvement in the decision making, and he wants great amount of independence and flexibility. So it's important for all of us to understand as we decide to move forward. So I've given you enough perspective about what's happening in the industry, what's happening at the workplace, what's happening at work itself. We talked about the opportunities for L&D. We talked about the challenges for L&D. We talked about the preferences of the new age learner. So we have got enough background information, enough narratives to now embark on our strategy for the future. How do we reimagine ourselves? What we need to do to reimagine, rethink, reinvent, repurpose ourselves. I think we need to step back. We need to step back for a moment and relook at everything. Everything about ourselves. We need to relook at our role, the roles that we are playing. We need to relook at our structure, our delivery models, our engagement models, and so on. We need to completely relook at everything and possibly redesign and reinvent what we need to reinvent. When you talk about the role, I think the immediate shift that I see is a switch to performance consulting. So we need to stop looking at ourselves as instructors, facilitators, content creators, etc., or L&D leaders or coaches, etc. We need to really start looking at ourselves as performance consultants. We need to leverage technology. I think that's the most important thing. Most of our strategies belong to the pre-digital era. We really now need to look at how we can leverage the best of technology as learning becomes virtual, as learning becomes anywhere, any place, anytime, as learning largely becomes self-service. We really need to look at what are the best technologies that we can leverage where learning can be very efficient and effective for a distributed workforce. What are the best virtual learning tools that we can leverage? Can we leverage artificial intelligence? Can we leverage augmented reality? Can we leverage virtual reality? Can we leverage chatbots? What can we leverage from a technology perspective to completely redesign the way we deliver and deploy learning solutions? Build digital assets, because digital assets are the assets of the future in various forms, whether in the forms of videos, podcasts, articles, blogs, or whichever format. It's time for us to build digital assets. It's important for us to create the right ecosystem as learning becomes largely self-service and to a great extent facilitated by facilitators and coaches. We need to create the right ecosystem where self-learning, peer-to-peer learning, collaborative learning, social learning can happen seamlessly. People would figure out how to learn, where to learn, but we need to make sure that we provide the right learning opportunities to them. We need to provide the right opportunity for them to interact with each other. They should know who to reach out to, how to reach out to. We need to facilitate that. We need to create an ecosystem where interactions can happen seamlessly, where learning can happen seamlessly. Our job, we need to build an ecosystem where we can connect people with content, content with content, people with people to make this learning seamless. We need to leverage learning analytics. Absolutely important in an era where millennials are going to rule the workforce. It's very important for us to understand and deploy learning analytics to understand the tastes and preferences of our learners, to understand the pace at which learners are progressing, to understand which content is relevant, which is not, which is working, which is not working. I think learning analytics is going to play a very important role as we reimagine L&D for the future. While this is a very high level view, we'll get into some of the specifics now. And we will see how is L&D changing in corporates, in organizations. We are moving away from open enrollments, from calendar-based programs to learning journeys. We are moving away from topic-driven delivery to business need-driven learning opportunities. So learning interventions are no more driven by topics like negotiation skills, strategic perspective, business communication, etc. It's about understanding the business needs which drive the learning interventions, not the topics or the themes. From formal learning, we're moving to a mix of formal and informal. From dissemination of concepts and knowledge, we are now taking accountability for driving skills and behavior change. From generally low-tech learning content, now learning the content and delivery is becoming online, social, mobile, high-tech. managers used to play a very passive role in the learning process. They did not have any skin in the game. Once they nominated their employees, it was up to the L&D function to determine how to drive their learning. But now managers are playing an active role in the development of their people. From minimal involvement, measurement, we are moving to measuring behavior change and measuring business impact. The measurements in the past was all about participation, coverage, feedback, satisfaction, score, etc. But today is about how much behavior has changed, what business impact that we have created. This is a significant shift that's happening in the L&D space in the industry today. As you look at the next slide, you can see some of the interesting shifts which are happening in the L&D space. We are clearly moving from the old to new. L&D, which took pride in the fact that there were support functions, subsequently called themselves enabling functions, functions which were enabling business strategies, today are very much part of the business itself. They're strategy accelerators. They're not just enablers anymore. They're just part of the business, very important core part of the business, accelerating the implementation of business strategies. From high quality services, we are becoming proactive influencers. We continue to provide high quality services, but the shift that's happening is towards becoming proactive influencers. From content creators, we are becoming content curators. There is just plenty of content available all over within the organization, outside the organization. We don't have to create content. L&D practitioners, content designers used to spend hours and hours and hours together in creating tons and tons of content, but we don't have to do that. There's just plenty of content available inside and outside. We need to curate them. From defined structured learning, we are moving towards culture of continuous learning. Anytime, anywhere, any place, facilitated by content which is learning, which is adaptive, immersive, which is personalized. From trainers, instructors, teachers, we are moving to facilitators, coaches of learning networks. From teaching skills, we are now switching towards teaching effective learning habits, because people would learn anyway. They would figure out how to learn, where to learn. We need to teach them learning habits so that they can learn more effectively and efficiently. From content which was set, defined, structured, we're moving to content which is dynamic, which is evolving as we move through learning journeys. From training events, we are moving towards learning journeys. From information silos, we are moving towards connected information, where information is not in silos anymore. It's all over, it is connected, and we have thousands of connected learners in organizations. Essentially, the shift is from a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. And it's time for L&D to look at the function as a startup. As you look at the next slide, that's the statement that L&D has to look at itself as a startup. L&D practitioners, executive coaches, instructors, facilitators will have to imagine that they are part of a startup. They have to become lean because the budgets are shrinking. They have to become agile because the content is dynamic. They need to keep pace with the dynamics, with the pace of change in technology, business models, etc. They need to take accountability. They need to take ownership. And a startup has to establish clear ROI. Of course, every business has to establish clear ROI. L&D has to very clearly define return on investment. And without return on investment in future, L&D may not survive. So it's time for all of us to look at ourselves as part of a startup, working for a startup, or entrepreneurs working for a startup. Now, what it takes to get there, what it takes to reimagine ourselves. Of course, it takes a few skills. It takes the skills that we need to imbibe as L&D practitioners and coaches. This is a survey that I ran myself. I reached out to several L&D leaders across the country, across different industries, and I asked them, what are the skills that you would like to see in L&D leaders of the future and the coaches of the future? And this is what they came back with. These are some of the skills that L&D practitioners and coaches need to imbibe: empathy and love for people, influencing and persuasion skills, performance consulting, ability to cope with ambiguity, connection with Gen Next, millennials, creative thinking and innovation, leveraging learning analytics, we talked about it, understanding business ecosystem, machine learning, using technology and digital platforms. These are very critical skills for L&D practitioners and coaches to imbibe if they really want to get ready to reimagine and reinvent their function. So, my dear friends, reinventing is all about the right tool set, the right skill set, and the right mindset. So, when we talk about the role of L&D facilitators, and we talked about the coaches, it's all about knowing the right tools, understanding and developing the ability to use the right tools, develop the right skills, and imbibe the right mindset. Essentially, the right attitude, the beliefs, and the values which are important for all of us to not just to survive, but also to be in a position to reinvent L&D and coaching of the future. And as coaches and L&D leaders ask me this question, that the world is changing, everything is becoming virtual, this is going to be distributed in a remote workplace. It's not the same that it used to be in the past. How can we train people in a remote environment? How can I coach somebody online? My response would be, learning happens neither in the classroom nor in the virtual platform. Learning happens in the brain. All of you are expert coaches. You know that learning happens in the brain. Those activities in the brain which get triggered, we need to, using our sensory cortex, we need to gather information from our environment. Using the temporal lobe in the brain, we need to reflect on what we gather, what we see, what we hear. Once we reflect, then we need to formulate new ideas and new plans. And that's what the prefrontal cortex helps us to do. Eventually, is the motor cortex of the brain which helps us do an active testing of the new idea that we formulate. So whether we are using a virtual platform or a physical classroom setting, what matters is how we engage our learner in all the faculties of the brain. How do we engage our learner in the learning process? That's important. How do we understand the fundamentals of neuroscience, of engagement, of participation, reflection, observation, experimentation, analysis, formulation of new ideas, testing, application, etc. How we engage our learners in that process. That's what matters. It's not the technology or the platform, because platform is just an enabler or a tool. So, my dear friends, as we begin our journey to reinvent L&D and coaching, we can see that two paths leading in two different directions. One leads to mediocrity, other leads to excellence. There is no third path, no alternative, no other path. The choice is on us, which path we want to take. With this note, I would like to pause here. Thank you very much. You can see my coordinates here. I will now pause for some time for you to ask questions if you have any.
Ladies and gentlemen, you can either post your questions in the chat or raise your hand, and I will kind of call out the names. We have about 15 minutes now to.
Good evening, Mr. Mohapatra. My name is Chandrasekhar. I'm a coach and trainer. And excellent presentation because it's absolutely no nonsense. Has caught all of us by the scruff of the neck on which way to go. And second one thing I struck a chord with me and most of us here is the usage of neuroscience, which we normally do in coaching. And the day is not far off. And you have already said that the neuroscience and learning is already present and not the future. So on that count, I have a couple of questions. One is that several places in your presentation, you mentioned about declining budgets and challenges and return on investment. The classical way of measuring training outcome, the oldest, the most standard which I have heard of is the Kirkpatrick method. When you move from level 1 to level 4 measure, the whole thing becomes nebulous with respect to the training department or a trainer's role in causing behavior change. Now, how do you intend measuring the ROI for training in the present and the future time? That is my first question. And the second question is, you also mentioned about AR, VR, and mixed reality. And in specific reference to soft skills and coaching, what kind of role do you think they can play and what will be the time frame? Thank you.
Sure. So coming back to the budgets that we mentioned, of course, the budgets are declining today. And that's also primary. One is we see that investment on technology going up, investment on learning budgets going down. One of the primary reasons what I feel is why the budgets are going down is because content has been democratized today. There's plenty of content available. You can look at the MOOCs of the world, the Udemys and then Coursera, the edX of the world. The premier universities across the world are offering courses for free or at a very nominal fee. So the cost of content, the cost of learning design also has significantly reduced. So content which is generic, which is basic, for the lack of a better word, content which is run of the mill, that's available. So we don't have to invest in that. We don't have to spend money on that. So whatever money that organizations and leaders are setting aside, we need to see how we can use that money effectively. So that's where your point about ROI is relevant. So now if there's less money, how do you really use that money to clearly establish ROI? So the way I would look at it is the question that we should ask before we start any program is why we must do this program. What is the need for this program? What business problem that we're trying to solve? If you don't have a business problem, if you don't have a need, we may not have to run this program in the first place. So what is that business need? Is the organization looking at L&D to support the organization to create a pool of leaders, pool of senior leaders from their existing mid-level managers? If that is a business need, you have a clear business impact that you can demonstrate. If you can really look at your mid-level managers, look at your high potential managers, take them through a learning journey for 6 to 9 months. And if 60% of your participants are ready for the next level, you have delivered your ROI. This is just one example. And there could be various other examples like this. But the fundamental question is what problem that you're trying to solve, why we must run this delivery or learning intervention. Second question about AR and VR. My exposure to AR and VR is very limited. I would, at this point in time, my personal experience in the AR and VR space has been more in functional, technical, and domain training. I personally have not seen, I would not say it is not being deployed, but I have not seen its application in behavioral space, leadership development, or in the coaching space. If there are any examples any of the participants have, they might share. But I haven't seen any examples. But I have seen a good amount of examples in the functional and domain space where actually organizations have started using it. I was talking to the training head of Maruti recently, and he was explaining to me how effectively they're using, because of the lockdown for the last 3 months, the factories, many parts of their factories have been shut down, but they're training their workforce on on different aspects of the assembly line and the workflow using AR and VR methodology today. And there are many other examples in the airline industry and then several other industries today. In the retail industry, there is a huge application of AR and VR and so on.
Okay. So here's a question from one Krishnan Iyer. Could you please share some open source cost-effective tools that you started using in L&D interventions in adapting the new norms of working?
Open source, I may not know, but there are very cost-effective tools, especially a couple of tools that I have started using personally. One is Kahoot for driving engagement. Another tool is Mentimeter. Again, these are tools which are available in public domain. For smaller audiences, they're also available for a free. They have a free version. And they have also enterprise licenses for large organizations which have needs for in a larger scale. So immediately that comes to my mind a Kahoot and Mentimeter, the two tools that we are using. I am personally using, and I'm finding them very useful.
Yeah, Kahoot is, it starts with K, right?
It starts with K, yes.
I have a follow-up question on what you've just said. When we talked about digital or classroom to digital to whatever, we are only talking about delivery methodology. I have a question for you. When we talk about Udemy and all the MOOCs and all, there is one-way training where it is on demand. There is no interaction in the sense of classroom training. Are we seeing a decline of ILT mode of delivery and going more in favor of on-demand e-learning? That could be fundamental for our training practice. Thank you.
My personal opinion is we would definitely see an increase in learning self-service, which is essentially online digitized learning. We'll definitely see an increase, but I don't think instructor-led training will be completely eliminated. That's definitely not going to happen. The coaches would still be required, the trainers would still be needed, but I definitely see it's going to be blended. But we would continue to see year after year an increase in learning self-service, in digitized online learning.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
It's almost going to be 9 o'clock. Any last couple of questions? Anybody's got? Okay, if there's nothing. Krishna?
Thank you, Mr. Yeah, I'm taking that. Thank you. Thank you very much, sir. It was an absolutely mind-blowing presentation. Really opened our eyes to what organizations are looking at in future. And also the fact that, like Chandrasekhar said, this is a group of people who work really on neuroscience. So I think the good news they probably got was they're slightly higher of their counterparts in the market. Yeah. And I think what you said is not something that can even be thought of being intuited. It was a wonderful presentation, very clear, very high level. And on behalf of all my colleagues here, thank you so much for finding the time and for SK to make this dream come true. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Krishna, Aprama recording.
The recording.